welcome to episode 63 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I want to talk about character sheets, some advantages of having them, some disadvantages of having them, and then pose the question, do you need them? Now, before I go any further, I need to clarify there is no one who can answer that last question for you except you. Every author is different. Some authors swear by character sheets and would never write a book unless they had their character sheets. And some authors absolutely refuse to do character sheets. They cannot imagine writing a story with the character sheets in mind. No one can answer if you need them except you. So my hopefully thing here today is just to give you some ideas about what some advantages of having, character sheets are and what some disadvantages are of having character sheets. And then you can make up your own mind as to what is best for you. So with no further ado, let's get down to it. Let's talk about character sheets. Alrighty then. Today's episode will be in two parts as always. In part one, I want to go over what are some things that I consider to be advantages of having character sheets. And then in part two, I'm going to go over some things that I think are disadvantages of having character sheets. And again, a reminder, there is no right or wrong for you. You decide what is right for you. If you want to do character sheets, excellent. If you don't want to do character sheets, excellent. You are the only person who can decide if they're good for you. So let's get down to it. First of all, what are character sheets? So I don't know if there's actually a definition for character sheets. They're not exactly like, if you're doing Dungeons and Dragons, the kind of character sheets you are, although there might be some overlap there. You can find templates for character sheets all over the internet. And if you are using Scrivener, they actually have character sheets there that they give you the questions and you just answer them. But you can do whatever kind of character sheet you want. It can be as generic as you want it to be or as detailed as you want it to be. Some character sheets literally have questions that you circle the answer to, like what color are their eyes? Are they this color, this color, this color? Or you can write them in. But there's all kinds of character sheets, so whatever kind you want. But in general, character sheets is information about your main characters. And you can have one character sheet for your main character, your protagonist, maybe a character sheet for your antagonist, maybe a character sheet for the, big supporting character or the love interest. And these are just places where you have some information about the character in question. So if you're doing, let's talk about your main character, you are of course going to have things like, what color eyes do they have? What color, hair do they have? But maybe you don't need to have that kind of stuff. Maybe you already know that. And by the way, for those of you writing nonfiction, I don't know if you actually even need character sheets. Do you really have characters that you need to worry about their appearance and their hobbies and all of that stuff or no? If you're doing memoir, do you need character sheets? I don't really know if you do. You know the people and the person's you. You know you. Do you really need a character sheet on yourself? I don't know if you do. But if you are writing fiction and you are creating worlds and people that are unique and new, it can be helpful to you to have character sheets. I'm going to give you some reasons why I think that, character sheets can be helpful. Now, if you are writing just one book, I don't know if you necessarily need character sheets. You kind of know what hair color and eye color your character has. And if you accidentally make a mistake where you talk about their brown eyes in chapter 1, and then later on you mention green eyes, well, that's probably something your editor is going to catch, hopefully, which my editor did, by the way, in one of them. Is that really an essential detail to your book? Unless your book is about a hypnotist and, looking into their eyes is a really essential part, I don't know how much you really need to have a character sheet talking about their eye color. But on the flip side, if you're only writing one book and it's a YA book and your main character is a tall girl who's in sophomore in high school, being 5'11" in high school is a big deal for a girl. She wears sneakers and suddenly she's, 6 feet tall and she's, the same height or taller than even a lot of the boys in her class. And that is a huge part of her. It really, really is. I'm just telling you from having taught high school, really tall girls, you'll see them walking down the halls and they're slouching because they want to be more of a height like the rest of the girls that they're, walking down the hall with. They don't want to be taller than the boy they're walking down the hall with. They don't wear, high-heeled shoes. They wear flats or, sneakers that don't have a big heel. I mean, it affects the way they look in the mirror. It affects a lot about them. So having a character sheet to remind you of that as you go through the book, because it can affect the way they see situations. So that might be helpful for that if you're doing just one book. But here are really the big advantages of having it, or if you have a series. And the biggest advantage of all is you want to have consistency in your series. And so having a character sheet is a good reference for you to look back at when you're starting to write book 2, when you're starting to write book 3. Or like me, the one I'm revising right now is book 9 of a series. Now, I do use character sheets. I do not have hugely detailed character sheets, but I do have character sheets and I add to them as I go. And that's an important part of having character sheets for me. Because if something happens to my character and I've, added this new thing about their personality in book 3, I don't want to forget it. I may not use it again or refer to it again in book 4 or book 5, but I may bring it back out in book 6. Or there might be something that I really don't talk about in a book. So I will give you an example of the current book I'm working on. So I had 3 main characters, Steve, Matt, and Jenny. All right. Matt and Jenny have been best friends since pre-K. I mean, they've known each other like their whole lives, basically. And Steve's kind of the newcomer to the group. And in this book 9, I was talking about, and he's reminiscing about when he moved to Beachdale, the city they live in, and he moved there 2 years ago. And then, that's what I wrote in my first draft. And then when I was going over it in my revisions, I was like, has it been 2 years? And so I had to go back to my character sheet and look, and I was mistaken, and that is not it. And I'm so grateful that I have that character sheet, and I had added that to my character sheet because I don't remember which book I talked about that in. I know it wasn't book 1, and I know it wasn't the last book. So somewhere between books 2 and 7, I had added when he moved to Beachdale, and I had forgotten. And I really am glad I don't have to go back and search for it in books 2 through 7 to find it because I had it on my character sheet. And so I could just look there and see and make the correction for this book. Now, going along with that, I actually had a character sheet for the antagonist in book 1. I didn't do that for all my antagonists, but I did it in book 1 because I knew I loved that character and I knew I would probably bring him back in another book, which I did, but not till book 7, which was published 10 years after book 1. So I am so glad I had my character sheet to kind of revive my memory as to, what he was like. And yes, I could go back and reread book 1, but this character sheet is definitely a good cheat sheet for me. Now, this is how I personally use my books. Another example. I have mentioned more than once that about Matt and his dad. And this is going to be kind of a spoiler alert again for those of you who have kept up with my books for my current book, because I've talked about it's only Matt and his mom. And whenever in the past, I've written, again, 8 books in that series, I've had Matt mention his dad before, like, yeah, when Dad and I would go camping, blah, 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 blah. Or when Dad and I did this, blah, blah, blah. Always in the past tense, but I never mentioned what happened to Matt's dad until this book. And I finally decided there was a situation in this book where I finally bring out what happened to Matt's dad. And if you don't want a spoiler alert, here's a time where you go, la, 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 cover your ears. Matt's dad passed away 2 years ago. And that was a very impactful for him, right? He's 12. He was really close with his dad. And I had never really brought that out, but now the situation arose where I wanted to bring something I had written, 10 years ago in my character sheet and actually bring that out. So this is how I personally use character sheets. So they are important for things like that. You can add, hobbies and backstory and family, and you may not use that in every single book, but you have it written down so that if you decide, in book 3 that, hey, this is going to take place when they go visit their dad, maybe you've already mentioned the dad, but you haven't mentioned a lot about what their relationship is like. Well, you can go to your character sheet and you already have it there of what their relationship is like, and you don't have to come up with the idea now. If you're writing mystery, character sheets might be a really good idea for you if you have like 8 suspects, because this is a good way to keep track of each of the 8 suspects so you don't get them confused as you're writing. Because if you write like me, kind of by the seat of your pants, then you might forget which character has this alibi, which character does this, and this is where characters sheets can be helpful to them. And don't forget, you can always add to them if you have recurring characters. And just one last advantage about this, when I was looking for a cover designer and I finally chose my cover designer, she did ask me for descriptions of my characters and about the book. And these were things that I literally went to my character sheet to get. So they were helpful for me in that way too. Now, before I get to the really big disadvantages of having character sheets, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. And if you're new to the podcast, every episode I give you a crazy law. And this is a law that once upon a time was a real law in history. And your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to write a brief story about that law. And this is just a way to kind of flex your writing muscles and, give you a break from your work in progress. So here we go. This week's crazy law. In Charlotte, North Carolina, there is a law that states there must be at least 16 yards of cloth around the body of a woman when she is on the streets. 16 yards! Do you know how much 16 yards is? That's a lot of yards. Anyways, there you go. Have fun with that one. All right, back to our show. All right, I'm going to talk about the disadvantages of having character sheets, and there really are 2 really big disadvantages. And they're big. That's why one of the things that may make you think twice about, do you really want to try character sheets? And the biggest one I'm going to give you right up front, and that is time. It takes time to fill out character sheets. Even if they're like pre-made character sheets, like the kind you get from like Scrivener or that you download from the internet, it takes time to fill them out. And that is time that you could be spending writing. So for many, many authors, the idea of character sheets, it's just too time consuming. I mean, if it takes you 2 to 3 to 4 hours to fill out these character sheets, that's already too long. That's already 2, 3, 4 hours that you wanted to start writing this book. And now you're not really into this book anymore because you spent so much time on these character sheets. So you really have to think, is it worth your time? So were the advantages I gave you in part 1 worth the time it's going to take for you to fill them out? And again, for me, they're pretty basic, but then again, my characters are 12 years old. If I had, 50-year-old characters, or if I'm doing a senior sleuth, I mean, these women would have, backgrounds and, former relationships and marriages and children and things that I should know before I write. That's a lot to write. Do I want to take the time to write that, or do I just want to go and see where the story goes? And so time is probably the biggest disadvantage in doing character sheets. And I know many, many authors who just don't do them for this reason alone. Now, the second disadvantage that I'm going to talk about is another one that I think is a very valid reason to not use character sheets if you choose not to use them. And that is you fall into a couple of dangers. And one of them is stereotyping. Stereotyping is one of those things that you don't really want in your book. Agents don't like them. Publishers don't like them. Readers don't like them. We don't want to see, the typical high school nerd, the typical this. And a lot of times when authors write really detailed character sheets, they use very typical stereotypes. And then you kind of pigeonhole yourself into, I'm in this situation, but what would a nerd do in this situation? And then you suddenly are writing the scene based on what you put on the character sheet instead of the organic way the story was flowing. And so you have to kind of be mindful of that if you have a really detailed character sheet, that you don't pigeonhole yourself into making the story about the character and not the plot that's going along or as you're writing the story. So kind of be careful with that. And another thing that I will warn you about, and then I will be done, I promise, and that is a lot of times people put things in their character sheets that are super cool, like the super cool fact about, this character, but it doesn't really fit anywhere in the story. So they just make it fit. They make it fit because they really like that they wrote this about their past, but they couldn't figure out where to put it in the book. So they just kind of unnaturally weave it into the story. And it just is out of place. And maybe this book just doesn't need that really interesting fact. Now, I know you really want to put it in there because it's really cool and you have it in your character sheet and you really want to use it. But if it doesn't fit into the story, it just doesn't belong. And of course, the good thing about it is if you're writing a series and you have that really cool thing and it doesn't fit into book 1, maybe it'll fit into book 2 or book 3. That's the cool thing about writing a series, is that you get to use all those interesting facts at some point. But if you're just doing a standalone one book and you've got these really cool facts, make sure that they are facts that are necessary and you're not just weaving these kind of cool backstory facts into a story where they don't really belong. Okay, I hope this helps. And again, like I said, there is no right or wrong. Do you need character sheets? It's either you want to try it out, you try it out, and if it didn't work for you, it didn't work. Or if you tried it out and you really like it, but you would tweak it next time around to do this instead, great. Or if you tried it and it absolutely did not work, you hated it, oh my gosh, don't do it. Don't do it. This is you, your stories. You're the author. You make these decisions. So there you go. I'm done talking about character sheets. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if so, please, please, please consider giving me a like or a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to or YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And remember, I drop a new episode every week. So until next Wednesday, stay safe, stay cool, stay hydrated, and I will see you all next week.